Number 5. The Dark. And my grandmother lived with a really kind man for 30 years. They never got married, but they were together. I never had a grandpa really, but he was the closest I ever had. And although I did love him, I often felt very uncomfortable when I was alone with him. At my grandma's house, I always slept up in the attic. There was a nice bunk bed, and I always had the room to myself. It was nice. However, when I woke up one morning, I looked out the window and saw that everyone was leaving except him. I was thirsty and needed to pee, but I didn't want to go downstairs. I figured that my family wouldn't be gone too long. I had my computer and my Nintendo DS with me. I figured I could watch episodes of Bleach and play my Bleach Dark Souls game for a while, and they would get home. So I watched, and I played, and I didn't go pee. And while I watched and played, I got hot and thirsty. He was in his mid-80s, and he always kept the house really hot. And when I checked the temperature later, it was 89 degrees in the house. I was up in that attic without water for nearly 8 hours. And finally, when my mom and grandma and sister returned, I went downstairs. They were all shocked that I had been up in the attic so long, but such was my uncomfortableness with my step-grandpa. When I was downstairs, I suddenly remembered my Nintendo DS and went upstairs to get it. And then there was darkness. It was a darkness I can't explain. I was aware of it though, but I didn't know who I was or where I was. There was no concept of time either. I can't explain exactly what it was, and unless you've experienced it yourself, you wouldn't know either. But it was a vast nothingness, and it lasted forever. After an eternity of it, I finally opened my eyes. I still didn't know who I was. I looked around the room, and there were people standing around me. I didn't know who they were or who I was. I couldn't move either. I started crying, because it was terrifying to be in that position. But very, very slowly, it came back to me. I began remembering who the people were. There were also paramedics who were putting me on a gurney. I had had a seizure. I'd fallen down and hurt my back and was convulsing when my family came to check on me. I guess this experience might not be scary if it never happened to you, but honestly, it was one of the most terrifying things to ever happen to me. That darkness, that emptiness. To be surrounded by absolutely nothing, and to be aware of that nothing. And there's nothing scarier than that. Number 4. The Lonely Dorm. During my junior year at Northern Illinois University, due to my good grades getting me scholarships, I was able to afford to have my own room in the dorms. I was in the honors dorm in Douglas Hall, a building that has since been demolished. They didn't have single rooms in that dorm, but honors students were often given double rooms as singles as a benefit for their performance. My room was on the 3rd floor, in the 3rd of the 4 wings in the building. It was actually my first dorm room, as I had attended community college for the first 2 years. It was strange getting used to living such a life, but any college students who lived in dorms know what I mean. Living at NIU was nearly like living in a small, self-contained city. With a student enrollment of over 26,000 and a campus of nearly 1,000 acres, it was a huge and continuously bustling community. Almost every night, the campus rarely quieted down. I recall at least 2 or 3 times a week hearing fire sirens going off and seeing trucks and ambulances at the dorms. If you got up in the middle of the night and went for a walk, it was very unlikely that you would have any privacy. There were always students everywhere. And now the reason I bring this up is contrast. Living in DeKalb, Illinois, I was much farther from my parents' house. My scholarships paid for my room, but they didn't pay for gas money. I had to choose whether I wanted to go and visit my family on either Thanksgiving or Christmas, and Thanksgiving won out. For the 5-week winter break, however, I decided to stay in my dorm room. Had I known what the campus was like during the break, I likely would not have made this choice. By Friday evening of the last day of class, practically the entire campus became deserted. It would be no exaggeration to assume that there were likely less than 5 people left in all 4 wings of my dormitory. I was also the only person on the floor in my wing. Adding to the feeling of isolation was the heavy snowfall that we got that year. The first week by myself in that huge building was fine. I'd occasionally venture out to the liquor store to get a bottle of wine, and then I'd occasionally run into 1 or 2 other students who were sticking around too. After the week, though, things began to resemble the movie The Shining. I really never saw anyone during my day, so I stopped shaving. About 2 weeks into vacation, I looked into the mirror and could have sworn I saw Jack Torrance looking back at me. It's weird what your mind can do when you spend all of your time not only alone, but in such a large, frozen, and isolated area. Without classes, my day lost all structure. I stayed up as late as I wanted, slept as late as I wanted. It didn't matter. It was way too cold to go outside very much anyway. You begin talking to yourself, not in a crazy way, just to hear a voice, or to actually speak. Although I am normally not very apprehensive, walking to the bathroom to take a shower was a bit unnerving. The hallway lights were out and were only dimly lit by the bathroom and water room lights. As I walked back and forth, I began getting very apprehensive and tried to make it back to the safety of my room as quick as possible. After I had been in the dorm by myself for about 3 weeks, I was up watching television in my room. It was about 2 a.m., and I was watching the game show network in the dark. Suddenly, there was a knock at my door. Startled, I barely moved. I had no idea why someone would be knocking on my door, not only in an empty building, but also at 2 in the morning. I thought it must have been the campus police. When the knock came again, I got up and looked through the keyhole. What I saw was not a campus police officer, nor did it look like a student. I was a bit older than most of the other students, but the guy outside my door was definitely in his 40s. He stood there, looking, and the door began knocking again. Well, I wasn't about to answer the door to someone I didn't know, and had no idea why or how he was in the building, so I ignored the knocking. Eventually, the knocker left. It was possible that the knocker never knew I was in there, as the door was thick, and I watched TV with captions. I didn't think about it. That is, until the next night, and I was again sitting in bed and again watching the game show network. This time, I'd been drinking a bottle of Riesling and wondering why Richard Karn was ever chosen to host the Family Feud when it happened again. I froze, not really knowing what to think. I hadn't forgotten about the previous night's encounter, but I had dismissed it as being anything important. Quietly, I got up and made my way over to the door. Looking through the keyhole, I saw it was the same man as before. He was looking down and knocking on the door. At this time, I was frightened. I obviously didn't think the man could get into my room. The door was solid and very thick, as dorm room doors tend to be, but I didn't know who the man was. How he not only got into the building, which required a key card, but into the floor I lived on, which required a key. This time, the man looked up at the keyhole, smiled, and stated, "I could get in if I wanted." Then he turned and left. I didn't know what to make of what was going on, but if anything, I decided to not open my door for any reason. This, however, was impossible, as I didn't have a bathroom in my room. I waited for several hours before I couldn't hold it anymore and had to go pee. It was 4:30 a.m. Still pitch dark because it was the end of December, and I decided the man had been gone long enough for me to go pee. I quietly left my room and locked the door behind me. I walked down the hallway to the bathroom, trying to be as acutely aware of my surroundings as possible. As usual, I seemed to be alone. Deftly, I made it into the bathroom, used a stall instead of a urinal, and tried to relax so I could pee. And the entire time, I heard noises in the bathroom with me. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I heard people talking. All of it, though, I hoped, was just the paranoia from the isolation I had been under. You'd be surprised what your mind can convince you of when you've been alone for a long time. After I was done peeing, I was too scared to flush the toilet, not because it would draw attention to me, but because the flushing sound would drown out any real noises. But I did it anyway. I apprehensively made my way back to the room. It was hard, because I was in a co-ed dorm with 4 hallways that met in the middle where the 2 bathrooms were situated. My room was at the end of the hallway, directly opposite a room with a sink in it that I used to get water. I slowly crept towards the room, looking all around. I hadn't heard any real noises, and it was very quiet in the dorm. As I got back to my door, my eyes darted around, and there was nobody anywhere. So I put the key in the lock, slowly turned it, and opened the door. As I pulled open the door, the light from the water room behind me flipped on. I didn't even turn around to look and see who it was. I opened the door, rushed into my room, slammed the door shut, and locked it. After a moment, I turned back to the door and looked through the keyhole. The man was standing outside my door. I heard him tell me I could get in if I wanted. He smiled at me, turned, and left. I knew I should call the campus police, but I needed to catch my breath. I was completely safe in my room, and I knew the man would be gone long before they could get there. After I caught my breath, I walked over to the desk and lifted the lid of my laptop computer. My entire body went numb as I saw a piece of paper taped to my laptop screen that simply read, "Anytime I want." Number 3. Audition. When I got out of high school, I immediately moved from the suburbs into the city of Chicago. It was my dream to be an actor, and living in Chicago would make it much easier for me to get to auditions. I forewent college because I was sure that I had more than enough talent to make it on my own. Well, for anyone who has tried to be an actor, you'll know how naive I was. Not only was getting parts next to impossible, getting auditions was as difficult as can be. I was unable to get a single audition in the summer, none for the fall, and I went into the beginning of winter without having one single audition. Finally, about a week before Christmas, I was calling the Chicago audition hotline. This was before I thought about looking on the internet. After hearing the regular ads, which were mostly just for musicals, emphasizing dancing or moving well as they called it, that required singing ability that I did not have. It was pretty much always like that though. After about 10 audition advertisements, I finally came across one that was for a small part in a local independent film. It was an unpaid position for a teenaged male for a small unspoken role. The audition was listed as being in Evanston, and they gave me a phone number to call. I figured that it was more important for me to have an unpaid role on my resume than for it to be completely blank, and I went ahead and called to see if I could audition. After ringing for about 10 times, I finally got an answer on the phone. A strange and strained voice answered and greeted me with a, "Hello?" I was taken aback, assuming that the person answering would at least have answered in some way that would indicate that it was the number for the audition. Hi. I'm answering the ad for the movie role," I responded, quite uneasily. There was a long pause before the voice asked me, "Oh, that's great." There was a long and uncomfortable pause. "Can you come in tonight for the audition?" "Tonight?" I asked, a bit surprised. It was already 8 p.m. and I wouldn't be able to get to Evanston on public transportation for nearly 3 hours. "I might not be able to get there until like 11. "That's fine," the person in the ad responded curtly. He then gave me the address and the instructions as to which number to buzz when I arrived. "If we like you for the role, we could film you right after the audition." He then hung up the phone. Now, I know what you're thinking in reading this. I would have to be an idiot in order to actually go see this guy for this audition. Every single thing about it seemed suspicious. I was desperate though. Other than my high school plays, I had absolutely nothing on my resume, and I needed something. I got bundled up and headed out the door. I didn't have a lot of money, so I figured it was just best for me to walk down to the Milwaukee North Line Metro train that stopped in Evanston. It was freezing outside. It must have been below zero. There were some people outside, but not many. After a freezing walk, I made it to the train. I got on it and spent about half an hour riding before I finally got to Evanston. After I got off the train, I realized that I was in a very quiet part of Evanston. I was met by a snowflake-filled and chilling breeze hitting my face. I had directions and knew it was going to take me a while to get to the place. It took me nearly 40 minutes of walking, but around 11:15, I finally found the building. It was nothing at all like I thought it would be. Rather than an office building or a studio or something, it was an old brick apartment building with a gated front yard. There was an apartment buzzer on the gate with about 30 buttons on it. I found the name I was looking for and buzzed it. I waited maybe a minute and a half and then tried it again. The second time, someone buzzed me in without speaking through the intercom. I made my way into the building without encountering anyone. Going through the hallway, I eventually found the door. Feeling very uncomfortable, but really wanting the role, I knocked on the door. Much like the buzzer, no one answered right away. But after a couple of minutes, a man opened the door. He was taller than me, really skinny and pale. with eyes set deep in his dark eye sockets. He barely opened the door when his eyes grew wide. "You've got the part," he immediately told me. "Come in, we'll film it right now." He stepped back, and I was able to see that the apartment lights were off. I didn't want to go into the apartment, and finally wished that I hadn't come for this audition in the first place. The whole thing was just way too odd. Why was a man casting me in a role, sight unseen, for a film, and wanting to film the scene right away? When I didn't move to walk in, the man looked mildly impatient. "Well, come on," he insisted. "You want the role, don't you?" I stood quiet for a moment. I just wanted to turn and run and just fuck this entire acting career. Nervously, I answered, "Well, what's the role?" The man half smiled at me. "Come in, and I'll show you," he told me. I went ahead and stepped into the apartment, and he closed the door. The hallway I was standing in was dark, and there was only one light on in a far-off room. I immediately regretted going into the apartment. I didn't move. I don't think this is the best idea," I responded. "I should just leave." The man looked mildly angry. "I stayed up for you to come to the audition, and I cast you right away," he informed me. "Are you really gonna waste my time by not coming in? I could have cast 100 other people easily." I stood and shuffled my feet. I nervously glanced at the door and wondered how fast I could get out of the building. Looking back at him, I stammered, I really don't think I'd be right for it. I don't really have the time to actually film anything." "You don't have to do anything," the man told me, extremely impatient. "I just have to film you, lying on the ground, since you're going to be playing a dead body." My heart skipped a beat, and I knew I had to get out of that apartment. The man was too close to me, and I wouldn't have been able to open the door and get out without him catching me. I decided to bluff. Acting relieved, I lied, "Oh, okay, that's a relief." I just thought it would be a dancing role, since almost every audition in Chicago cares more about dancing than acting. He looked at me skeptically and nodded. "Well, come in here and we'll film it." The man turned slightly to move down the hallway. With my heart pounding against my chest, I turned, quickly unlatched the door. The man had taken a couple of steps, but turned back to me when he heard it. However, him turning was the last thing I noticed as I threw the door open and ran out of the apartment. I have no idea if he followed me, because I booked my ass out of the building, out through the front gate, and I didn't stop running until I was back at the metro train, waiting on the platform. I nervously looked around, expecting the man to have been following me. The trains only ran once every 2 hours that late at night, so I had a long wait in the freezing cold for the train. It didn't matter though. The cold was much more pleasant than being in that apartment. I was sweating from the running, so I was lucky that I didn't get sick when I finally boarded the train, and I felt relieved. I called the acting hotline every day, and about 2 months later, the ad was up again. This time, however, it was in Ithaca, and not Evanston. I wondered if I should call the police, but didn't really know what they could do. I called the acting hotline message center and told them about my experience. I never heard an ad like that again, and I hope it was because the hotline quit posting it. I prayed every day that he never cast that part. Number 2. A Walk in the Park. This story takes place in a town north of Chicago called Gray's Lake. The only thing Gray's Lake is really known for is the hard rock band Chevelle. They hailed from there. It also has tons of new homes, tons of those subdivisions that I like to call Lego houses, because they all look the same and they seem to go up overnight. Well, back then, Gray's Lake wasn't like that. It was a small retirement community with a small school, a few small businesses, and a park. There was no bus service within the town, so students had to either get rides or walk to school. The vast majority walked. I didn't grow up in Grayslake, but I did transfer there during my sophomore year of high school. Unlike other schools I had been to, I made a lot of friends in Grayslake. I joined the drama club and was immediately cast in my first play ever. It was fun, but it mainly gave me time after school to hang out and talk with my new friends. Often, we would sit around talking way past sunset, and then had to walk home in the dark. It was October 15, so it actually got dark very early. A female friend and I were the last two people to leave after rehearsal, and it was around 9 o'clock. Although I was only 5'7" and a whopping 135 pounds, I had a lot of bravado, and offered to walk her home because she didn't feel safe walking home alone. She asked me if I would be scared walking home afterwards, and I basically told her not to worry about me. I don't get scared very easily. Well, I really had never been to her home before, and hadn't been aware she lived on the other side of the park. I walked her through the park to her home, said goodbye to her at her driveway, and after she thanked me for walking her home, began my own walk to my home. It was pretty cold outside, so I shoved my hands in my jacket pockets as I walked down the street. I found the gateway into the park and entered it onto the paved bike path. It was very uncomfortable because I was the only person in the park. It was very dark and there was very little lighting there. I figured that must have been because most people did not walk in the park in the pitch black night. I got on the path, not completely at the beginning of it. I kept looking around, trying to convince myself I wasn't scared, just cautious. At one point, looking behind me, I saw a man who looked like he was in his mid-20s, walking on the path in the distance. I didn't see much about him, but he was wearing a red polo shirt. I had no reason to think the man was up to anything, but I did feel my heart start to beat a little faster. I figured it was best to just keep my pace though. If he was up to no good, running seemed the worst possible option. As I walked along, I tried to not keep peeking behind me, but it was impossible not to. I noticed that although it didn't seem like he had sped up at all, the man had gained on me. I didn't get a good look at him and decided to simply speed up. As I walked faster, I glanced back, and I noticed that he was walking faster too. My heart began to race, and I finally began to get scared for the first time. A quick peek revealed he had gained on me more. I saw the exit to the park getting closer and closer, and I went ahead and sped up, speed walking at this point. I quit looking back, and with my heart racing, I got to the arched gateway that led out of the park. Although I tried not to look behind me, my right eye caught something in my peripheral vision coming at me from behind at an incredible speed. I felt a jolt of electricity course through my body as I realized that the man was running at me and I wasn't going to be able to get away. However, with my heart pounding in my ears, I saw a young boy on his bicycle pass me on my right, and he kept riding away. Once my nerves calmed down, I remembered the man following me in the park. Turning around, I saw no one on the path. I have no idea where he went or why he had went away. I just went home. During that time, on the far side of town, a gas station had recently been built. Not long after it opened, a story about something that happened there circulated around town. I had no idea if it was true. I still have no idea if it's true. I suppose I could look it up online, but I really do not want to know. At school on Monday, I came across my female friend. She told me that after I dropped her off, her mom had wanted to come outside and give me a ride home. I told her I appreciated it, but it wasn't necessary. She then told me that her mom had been worried because apparently there had been a rape an attempted murder at the local Shell station. What I was told is that earlier in the day, a woman bought some gas and paid for a car wash. When she was going through the car wash, the clerk manually shut the car wash down, locking her in. He then got into the car wash, brutally stabbed and raped the woman, and locked her in her trunk, leaving her for dead and planning on dumping the body after work. He put an out of order sign on the car wash. However, she wasn't dead. She kicked out the back seat of the car, got out of the car wash and went for help. The man noticed she was gone and fled the station. He wasn't caught until the following day. I have no idea what happened that night. I'm a guy, and I doubt that a man who had raped a girl would try to rape me. However, he did try to kill her, and if he was scared he would get caught, he may have tried to do something to me. I didn't know. What I do know is that I have since been into different Shell stations, and the polo shirt that man was wearing was identical to the ones the other employees were wearing. Number 1. Matthew. I want to tell you a story. This is my 200th video, and I'm about to hit 25,000 subscribers. I want to warn you though, this story is very, very heavy and very, very upsetting. However, it is true. It is a story that happened to me when I was 15 years old. As many of you know, an issue very important to me is teenage runaways. One of the reasons that this is so is because I was a teenage runaway. It's weird though how it happened, and my family barely noticed. And when I was 15 years old, I met a very interesting boy named Matthew. He was sort of a golden boy. He had long blonde hair, he was a star athlete, a martial artist, a straight-A student, and just completely popular. And we became best friends. I'm not sure what it was, but I suspect it had a lot to do with our families. We were both overachievers who barely got noticed for what we did. And my parents were divorced, and I lived with my father, who was an abusive idiot. He married a stupid woman named Eileen, who was so repulsive in personality that writing her name in the script was actually hard to do. Matthew's parents were also divorced. He lived with his mom, who was a lawyer, and his brother Giovanni, who we just called Gianni. Matthew and I bonded through many shared interests. I can't really explain what our relationship was like. It was like meeting somebody who was just exactly me, but not me. It was a bond I never had before and never had since. And Matthew's family was very rich, and on his 16th birthday, his father bought him a new convertible Mustang. I remember the times we had riding around in the car. It was freedom. So many people probably wonder why we ran away. We both had a horrible day. My stupid father thought it was weird that I was spending so much time with Matthew. You know, ever since I was 4 years old, he always called me a faggot. I'm sorry for saying that word, I hate it. But he would always call me that. Sure, I was a little weird, I guess. I played with My Little Ponies, Barbies, and things with my cousin and sister. My favorite color was pink, and he actually forced me to change my favorite color. Like he thought me liking pink would turn me gay. He had some weird obsession with my sexuality, even though he really had no idea what it was. So my hanging with Matthew led him to believe it was a homosexual relationship. He called me a faggot again, and I just couldn't take it anymore. In the middle of the night, I grabbed some things and I went to Matthew's house. I was shocked when I saw he had a black eye. His mother had hit him because she disapproved of our relationship. It was so weird to me how two friends spent so much time together, and everyone had to assume it made us gay, For the life of me, I just didn't get it. And we were done. Matthew packed some things, he got his money, and we got in his Mustang. And we left. The rest of this is hard to write. It was easy writing about our friendship because the memories were good. We didn't have the worst time when we ran away. I mean, some people run away and they have no money or anything. We had a car and we could get hotel rooms. They weren't nice hotel rooms. They were kind of ratty, but we were able to get some place to sleep. And we didn't go without food. Our runaway was so much less hurtful than it could have been. Up to a point. If you're easily upset, I suggest you skip this and go to the closing. I'll put the timestamp in the description. One night, a week after we ran away, I woke up in the middle of the night. Matthew was not in the room. I looked over at the bathroom and saw light from the door. I got up and went and knocked on the door. There was no answer. I knocked again and called his name. There was no answer. Finally, I just opened the door, and what I saw sent me falling to the floor. Matthew was lying in the bathtub. The water was soaked in blood. Both of his arms were completely ripped up. His blank eyes looked empty. He didn't look like Matthew. Whatever made him Matthew was gone. On the tile of the bathroom wall, in blood, was the word Lucky. That was Matthew's nickname for me. He always told me I was his lucky charm. So it was suicide. I mean, it had to be. He didn't leave a note. I have no idea why he did it. I don't know why he left me like that. To this day, I have no answers. But in a world of scary stories, well, this one might not scare you very, very much, and I'm sorry if it doesn't, but it was the most terrifying thing I have ever been through in my life. My friend, my best friend, a man that has never been replaced. And this is why I'm obsessed with teenage runaways. Maybe if Matthew and I hadn't run away, maybe he would still be alive, and maybe he and I would be in a car, driving along with the wind in our hair, enjoying the world. Life is precious. Life is wonderful. Cherish it, please, and take suicide seriously. It is a bad choice. And although I didn't script this, I want to say one more thing. This is why I researched suicide. My thesis was on suicide in Japan, and one of the reasons that I wanted to tell my story finally is because of a certain idiot who was very disrespectful to a suicide victim a while ago. We know who he is, I won't mention his name, but what he did was completely awful, and I hope that he never loses a person this way. I hope that he never knows how it feels, because if he knew how it felt, he wouldn't have been so fucking stupid. Again, life is precious. Life is wonderful. Cherish every moment. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. So, I hope you enjoyed this video, getting to know me a little better. Other than the number 1 story, these weren't really in any particular order. Going back over them again, it makes me feel weird really. The Matthew story is pretty deep, but I don't want anyone to be upset about it. It was a long time ago, and I've come to terms with it. I do get a little choked up when I talk about it, but it is the past, and I dealt with it, and don't be sad for me. I'm living a very happy life with many, many wonderful people, including all of you, who I get up every day and think everything that I have people, wonderful people in this world who are so great that they listen to me ramble on in stories and seem to like it. So please don't feel sorry for me. My next 2 videos are going to be a compilation of subscriber stories. I will also be doing a creepypasta, the well-known Psychosis. I don't get the majority of my stories from subscribers. Most of them I get from forums, where I try to find people who have stories to tell about certain subjects. It's one of the reasons I am able to give you new stories all the time. 3 of the stories in this video were told in some of my earlier videos, but I re-recorded them and I hope you enjoy them all. When I began this channel, I never considered the possibility of reaching 200 videos and 25,000 subscribers. It is overwhelming, really, and thank you all for your support, and let's get this to 300 videos by the end of the year, if not more. You can also take a look around at the Killer Orange Cat merchandise store. My sister added some mugs on Teespring, and there is a link to them in the description. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or using the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. And feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter, using the links in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. And, whatever you do, please, don't forget to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.